I'm coming in hot before we dive into today's episode because I have a special announcement, something I've been dreaming of creating for the past 7 years. You know how it feels to learn all of this amazing personal growth stuff, but then somehow end up feeling worse because you're not actually doing it? Like your knowledge is actually making you feel guilty instead of empowered. I get it. That's exactly why I created Living Mind Love. Each month, we'll explore one focus area through the lens of neuroscience and spirituality. But here's the magic part. Instead of overwhelming you with changes, we'll break everything down into tiny micro shifts that your brain actually welcomes, so you'll understand the science behind why it works, connect with the spiritual wisdom, and most importantly, actually apply it to your life. The value in this program is worth at least 50 times what I'm going to be giving it to you for, because it is my mission to help as many people as possible transform their lives. You'll also get access to the first ever Mind Love community on School. So if you're ready to stop collecting wisdom and start actually living it, go to mindlove.com/waitlist to join the waitlist, and you'll get instant access to my 10-year vision meditation. So let's get into today's episode. Welcome to an exclusive episode of Mind Love. Today's episode is all about how to overcome what our brains tell us.
It's not always about calm. It's about being able to ride through what's happening without making a big story around it. So, I can feel a sense of sadness or disappointment. And I could go like, oh no, I feel sad and disappointed. Oh no, I'm such a bad person, which then will bring on more sadness and disappointment. Oh no, I can't believe I did that. It's going to mean this and this and this, more sadness and disappointment. And it gets heavier and heavier and bigger and bigger. Or I can start to feel some sadness and I can go like, oh no, not sadness. I hate feeling sadness. And then start to create anxiety and tension around the sadness and, magnify it that way. Or I can just say like, hey, I feel some sadness and disappointment. I feel it as a sensation of tightening in my throat, and sadness kind of feels like this weight in my chest here. And yeah, that's what's happening right now. That's a human thing to do.
Our brains are powerful and tricky. Most of us identify with our brains. We see it as though the thoughts in there are ours. They're a representation of who we are at our core. They're the parts of us that no one knows, and they still come up as thoughts, so that must be the deepest versions of ourselves. Well, that's a load of crap. I don't know if this is good news or bad news for you, but for me, it's great news. Our brains are not a representation of who we are at our soul. Our brains are machines. Their purpose is to process stimuli and experiences, and the state of your brain is mostly a representation of its training. Sure, also genetics, but mostly training. Throughout our lives, we create habits of thought, which create thought patterns, which then feel like they're inescapable because they keep showing up. But it's similar to any physical habit, really. Maybe you play with your hair when you're nervous, or you shake your leg uncontrollably when you're focused, or you make weird faces when you do stuff. We tend to think, I've always done that. It's just who I am and I can't change it. Want to know how I know that's crap? When I watch the children of the super wealthy, like the kind of wealth that send their kids to etiquette school, or that grew up in the spotlight with a camera on them all the time, notice how self-aware they are. There's rarely a moment where they're not photogenic, right? Meanwhile, take a photo of me at the wrong time, and I've got a double chin, legs agape, a lazy eye, and I'm drooling a little bit. Which leads me to wonder how kids these days are going to grow up. Our obsession with Instagram basically creates an environment where every kid grows up with their own mom and paparazzi. Anyways, the point is, they've trained themselves. Yeah, it's partially kind of sad, depending on how you look at it, but also, the fact is, they just brought more awareness to the things that most of us do on autopilot. In the public speaking program that I did last year, a huge part of it was honing our little nervous tics, like swaying back and forth, or shaking our hands, or picking at our fingernails, or looking down too much. And guess what? By the end of the program, everyone had released those nervous tics. Well, our brains are the same way. We create habits and patterns of thoughts and moods and reactions, and if left unchecked, they start to feel inescapable. We start to think that I'm just an unhappy person, or I'm an anxious or depressed person. My brain is just different. Well, guess what? All of our brains are different, just like all of our bodies are different. But all of our brains have the ability to make conscious positive changes, just like our bodies do. Maybe one person easily builds body mass, and another person, no matter how hard they try, just can't get that same muscle tone. But that second person is still getting stronger and more fit. It might just manifest differently in their body. Or maybe one person can easily do the splits while someone else never quite gets there no matter how much yoga they do, but they're still getting more flexible than when they started. They're taking care of their bodies. The same is true for our brains. Some of us have things that are harder for us. We have a kind of built-in struggle or a predisposition to be anxious or depressed. But the rest is up to us. We can neglect it and let those neural pathways get deeper and more ingrained, or we can work with it. And from a spiritual perspective, those built-in struggles speak to our path here in this lifetime. There is something about that struggle that is glaring you in the face day after day because your soul came here to learn through it. So today we're going to be talking about how to overcome what our brains are telling us, and a lot about meditation and how to use what we learn in meditation throughout the rest of our day. Our guest is Ariel Garten. She's probably one of the most interesting people you'll meet. She's a neuroscientist, mom, former psychotherapist, former fashion designer, and the co-founder and visionary of a really amazing, successful tech startup called Muse. Muse is this device that actually tracks your meditations to give you real-time feedback on your meditation, guiding you into the zone and solving the problem that most of us have when starting a meditation practice. So Muse can actually let you know when you are doing it right. So Ariel is here to teach us about our brains and how to overcome its limitations, along with some practical tools and insights that we need to help us become our best selves. 3 key things we will learn are what happens to the brain when we meditate, how to stop identifying with our thoughts, and how to reroute our thoughts when they start going down a negative path. And I have a special discount code for the Muse meditation headband for anyone that's interested. Mine is coming in the mail this week, and I literally can't wait. I've gone to this website so many times and almost purchased it, and I finally pulled the trigger because what better to invest in 2020 than a little companion to help me find peace? Also, just a little forewarning, this was recorded during a month that was particularly difficult for me. I was pretty sure I had full-blown prenatal depression, and I was having a really hard time. So I do get a little emotional. The good news is I worked through it. It was temporary, and it made me even more cognizant of the tools that I have in my power to help me work through moments like that. So just know if you're going through a hard time right now, you are not alone. We are all struggling a bit. And now let's welcome Ariel Garten to the show.
Thank you. It is a joy and a pleasure to be here.
So I am really excited for this episode. I have been looking at your amazing invention for a couple of years now, but I'm curious, what got you so involved in meditation and especially combining meditation with tech?
So I was practicing as a psychotherapist, and I would be trying to teach my patients to meditate, and they would rarely be successful at really starting the habit. I myself, as a therapist a decade ago, by now probably 15 years ago, was not a great meditator. I would sit there and try to meditate. My brain would bounce all over the place. I would get frustrated. I would try to teach my patients, they'd go home, they told me they meditated, but who knows what they were doing. And at the same time, I was actually working in a research lab with an early brain-computer interface technology. So it was a single EEG electrode, and when you placed it on your head, it could tell when you were focused and when your mind was wandering. It was reading your brainwave activity. And I recognized that really what this EEG technology was doing was very similar to meditation. It knew when you were focused and when your mind was wandering. And it could really solve the problem that I was having with my patients to let them know when they were meditating, when they were focused and when their mind was wandering. So I got together with my 2 co-founders, the absolutely incredible engineer Chris Ameny and my co-founder Trevor Coleman, who was just amazing at business. And the 3 of us came together to create Muse, the brain sensing headband that helps you meditate. And since its creation, it's now been 6 years that it's been in market, and hundreds of thousands of people use it regularly to give them feedback on their meditation to know when they're doing it right and to start or enhance their practice.
I've talked a lot about meditation on this show, and it's funny the different perceptions of it or the different ways that people explain it. And I have heard a lot of people say, like, you can't really meditate wrong, but that's not necessarily the case. What is a proper meditation session? What's doing it wrong? What are the misconceptions?
Sure. So first of all, there's many, many different forms of meditation. There's Zen meditation, focused attention, transcendental meditation, mantra meditation, mindfulness meditation. They all have a lot of pieces that are in common, but with slightly different flavors. With Muse, what we teach is the most basic form of meditation that most people learn first, and that is focused attention meditation. So in focused attention meditation, what you're doing is you put your attention on something neutral, typically your breath. And then when your mind wanders away from your breath, it's your job to notice that your mind has wandered and choose, instead of following those wandering thoughts, to instead bring your attention back to your breath. So it's this very simple action. Focus your attention on your breath, or a word or a candle. Focus your attention on one thing. When your mind wanders away from that thing, notice that it's wandered, and then choose, instead of following a thought, to come back to your breath and to just do it gently and non-judgmentally. So this very simple process is, straightforward. Focus, mind wanders, notice, return. Focus, mind wanders, notice, return. But it can be very frustrating to people because one of the main misconceptions that people have about meditation is that your mind is supposed to go blank. Like there's this magic moment where your mind just goes blank and everything becomes silent and you can stay there forever. And of course, most of our minds never go blank. Frankly, it's more likely to levitate first than it is for your mind to go blank for any significant period of time. And let me tell you, I've never levitated. I'm pretty sure I never will. In reality, what happens is our minds are always moving from subject to subject, topic to topic. And as a meditator, what you're doing is you're cultivating the awareness of your mind and the ability to make different choices about where it goes. Because, most of us just kind of spend our life on autopilot with thoughts happening in our mind. And with meditation, you have the opportunity to shift that, to bring intentional focus, to bring attention to where your mind is, and to make a new set of choices because of that.
And that's kind of what mindfulness is. It's like you learn this thing in meditation to be able to be more conscious about where your mind goes. And then the mindfulness is really how you bring that to your daily life. Is that how you would describe it?
Totally. So meditation is the practice or the training that you do regularly. You sit for your 5 or 10 or half an hour or 1 minute, whatever works, I'm fine with. You sit for your time and you practice the skill. And then the skill that you build, that you take out into the world with you every day, is mindfulness. Mindfulness is defined as the non-judgmental, moment-to-moment awareness of your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and environment. So at every moment you are aware, you are attending to the things in the present moment, which is your awareness of your thoughts, awareness of your feelings, awareness of your surrounding environment, and having that awareness in a way that is intentional and non-judgmental. So yes, mindfulness is the skill that you build that you then take with you into the world.
It's interesting because you mentioned how we have these expectations of our brain going still or silent. And that was definitely what I thought meditation was supposed to be. I first started learning meditation in high school. My cross-country coach started to teach us, but I was like, is this possible? Is there something wrong with my brain? And I remember somebody explaining it in a way years later about how that's an unrealistic expectation. Our brain is supposed to create thoughts. And there's just something about that idea that I'm not broken because I'm creating thoughts. Like, that's what it's supposed to do. It's doing what it's supposed to. Now, my job, if I want to learn how to run this machine to actually lead a happy life, or one that I feel a little bit more in control of, or calm throughout, I should say, because we never really have control. But then it's my job to learn how to use it, or you learn how to, I wanted to say wrap my mind around it, but use it in the best way possible to optimize its processes. And so there's just something about a simple mindset shift to see that that's what it's supposed to be doing that makes it so much easier to approach the practice because you're not judging yourself throughout it.
Yes, and non-judgment is key. And it can be very hard to be non-judgmental when you're like, what's a thought doing? I'm not supposed to have thoughts. It's like, thoughts come. That's okay. Let them come. This is what thoughts do. The question is, what do you do about it when a thought arises? Do you get freaked out? Do you get upset? Do you get frustrated at yourself? Or do you simply accept that this thing happened, move on, and refocus? And that then becomes the larger life lesson that you're learning, that we don't need to resist and fight with the things that are happening. We don't need to react strongly to the things that are happening. Things arise. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're bad. It doesn't really matter. They happen. You accept. You move on.
So what's actually happening in the brain when we meditate?
Ooh, one of my most favorite questions. So there's a number of different processes that happen in the brain when you meditate. One of the kind of most interesting dynamics is between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that's responsible for your higher order processing, for your planning, your attention, your inhibition, your organization, your thinking. That's the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, at the front of your forehead. There's another part of your brain in the middle of your head called the amygdala. And the amygdala is your fight or flight response. It's the thing that's always scanning for danger and looking for things that may be dangerous to you. Now, these can be real dangers like fire or the wrong choice of president, depending on who you think it should be right at that now. Or it might be a perceived danger, which could also be the wrong choice of president. Who knows what a real danger is these days from a presidential perspective. Or perceived danger like, what are those people talking about? Do I have a wrinkle in my pants? Does my hair look bad? And in meditators, what we see is actually a strengthening of the prefrontal cortex and a decrease of the activity in the amygdala. So in one study by Dr. Sarah Lazar at Harvard, she looked at long-term meditators and measured the thickness of their prefrontal cortex. So bad news, as you age, your prefrontal cortex thins. But good news, if you're able to maintain a long-term meditation practice, you can maintain the thickness of your prefrontal cortex even as you age. In one of Dr. Lazar's studies, she had a subject who was 50 years old, and he had the prefrontal cortex thickness of a 23-year-old. So this stuff works. And what the prefrontal cortex is able to do is to actually downregulate the amygdala through meditation. So the amygdala is kind of like the child. It's the part of your brain that's always scared and reacting and you're jumping at anything. And it could be a spider or a shadow of a spider or a thing that looks like a spider. And the prefrontal cortex is the thing that's able to have reason, to sort of look around, to scan the environment, to see what the real situation is, and then make a choice about what to do about it. And it's almost like the amygdala, the scared little child reacting to everything, can be calmed or regulated by the prefrontal cortex, the parent, through a long-term meditation practice. And when you look at the brain scan of long-term meditators, you actually see an increase in projections between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, demonstrating the increased control that the prefrontal cortex may now be able to have.
Wow. So what age does the prefrontal cortex start to thin?
So in general, degradation of the brain kind of happens from 30 onward.
This makes so much sense as to why anyone over the age of 30 suddenly is the passenger seat driver, jumping every time you get within 100 feet of another car. I'm just thinking of my mom and I'm I've always looked at her why are you getting so nervous? We're so far away from that car. My stepdad is slowing down. What's going on? And lately I've been doing that. And I'm my husband's we're plenty far away. But how much meditation per day or what's the type of practice that's needed to prevent this thinning?
So just to be clear, meditation is not the cure-all for everything. It so happens that it demonstrates that it can maintain the thickness. I can't promise you it'll prevent, but the research looks really good. And typically in these kinds of studies, they look at individuals who've been meditating for about 20 minutes a day. There's one very cool study by Dr. Eileen Luters, and there she saw long-term meditators, which she defined as somebody who's been meditating for 5 years or more, had a brain that looked on average 7.5 years younger than a non-meditator. So by doing this long-term meditation practice, which actually isn't that long, 5 years or more, they were able to make changes in their brain that made their brain actually look younger. So larger hippocampus, which is the part of your brain responsible for learning and memory, increased connection in the corpus callosum, which links the left and the right hemispheres, increased volume of the frontal cortex, etc. And then in terms of timing, it actually doesn't take that much meditation to make change. So in another study by Dr. Sarah Lazar, she taught an 8-week course of mindfulness meditation, probably a basic MBSR course. And there they saw in just 8 weeks an increase in the density of gray matter of novice meditators. So the density of gray matter is the number of connections that you have in your brain. And those were able to increase with just 8 weeks of meditation.
So are these permanent changes? Or I would almost assume it's more like working out, where you build muscle, but if you stop working out, the muscle is going to go away.
So changes in the brain are a little bit of both. So what you're doing when you make a change in the brain is you're making more connections and, more neural mass or volume in a particular area. And part of that needs to be worked out. What fires together, wires together. And then when you stop firing over time, you lose the pathway. But you do have a creation of a pathway that can be rekindled. So it's not just like you go to the gym, you build some muscle, you stop, you lose your muscle. There's actually like a basic wiring that's set in place that can be more easily rekindled the next time, even if you haven't done it for a period of time. So it's like any learning, you get rusty at it, but you maintain some of the benefits over time. It is a practice. So, just like going to the gym, you need to do it every day in order to see the benefit.
Right. And I know that when I'm meditating regularly, I do just feel more in control over my thought processes. And it's like, I don't really get caught up as easily in what's going on around me. But what I've found is that it's really easy for me to keep a meditation practice when things are easy around me. It's like, okay, I'm already calm. I can go sit calmly again. But it's like when I need it most, when the world is chaotic or when my life is chaotic, those are the times where it feels difficult to sit down because my mind is being pulled in every direction. How do you overcome that? Because I feel like a lot of the times that would lead to a meditation practice that might not be serving me in the best ways possible.
Okay, so it's totally okay that your brain is bouncing all over the case. It's totally okay that you might feel frustrated with it. What you're learning in the process of that particular practice is how you deal with the difficulty in life. And that's really what meditation is teaching you ultimately. And so, when you sit down for 10 minutes of meditation and after minute 3, you have an itch in your foot and this feels boring and you're getting kind of frustrated, like all that emotional stuff that's coming up that gets you to want to scratch, to move, to get away, to run away. All of that stuff, all of those inherent patterns that you would normally play out in that moment, when you sit in meditation, you have the chance to observe and then to change how they play for you. Because normally in a boring activity, it's like 3 minutes in and you're like, I'm out of here. I can't sit here anymore. This is driving me crazy. Or you're trying to do a hard task and you're like, I can't do this. I feel crappy about myself. I'm going to get up and run away. And in meditation, what you do is that you feel that sensation of like, okay, difficulty, okay, discomfort, and you just observe that it's happening in you. And then you realize, whoa, I didn't act on it, and hey, I'm still okay. I didn't scratch my foot, and it's a minute later, and it actually kind of dissipated. Oh, it itches again, but maybe I just won't scratch it this time, and hey, it's still okay. I'm still alive. I'm still here. Wow, I didn't have to scratch that itch, and it's fine. I didn't have to run away or shirk away from this thing that felt uncomfortable. Like the feeling rose, the feeling fell, and I'm still here. So a lot of that facing discomfort, a lot of that facing the awkwardness and getting through it with grace, that is what meditation teaches you.
Yeah, I started meditating more regularly in my late 20s, and I had basically all the training that led to this podcast was me overcoming the things that I had gone through earlier in my life. And it led to a version of me where I was really good at letting things roll off my shoulders. There was a point where my landlord sold my place, my company shut down, and I crashed my car in a 1-week period of time. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, how are you not freaking out? And I'm like, the universe will provide. This has happened before. It wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. So I was just very nonchalant about it. And it was really interesting because I ended up meeting my husband, and if all that stuff wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't have met my husband and we wouldn't have started dating. Just the way everything happened, the way I was able to go stay in a new city, it was just interesting. And so I was like, see, told you guys. But then something like COVID hits, right? And I had sort of difficult time in the beginning. At first, the first month, I was like, everything happens for a reason. Maybe the world is resetting. And then about a month in, I was like down. And I had the tools, so I was able to get out of it. And meditation was really helpful. But it was like I was starting from scratch. It was like it didn't come as naturally. I had to use all the tools. And then now with this pregnancy, I was telling you before we started recording that when I was researching for this episode, I like to play podcast roulette, and I'll like find a podcast that looks interesting that you've been on, and I just go to a random timestamp, and just at that moment you started talking about postpartum, and I actually started crying. I hope I don't cry right now, but it was like,
okay if you do.
Like this week has been really hard, and I'm used to having things under control, and I think the hard part is that I've learned not to assign meaning to the thoughts in most cases, but when it almost feels like a Groundhog's Day, or it at least today has been a good day, I will tell you that, but the last week, it's like the days are just starting over. I can't wait to go to bed just so the day's over, and then I wake up, I don't really want to get up, and I do a task just to pass the time, and it feels like everything's meaningless, and I'm like, and on one hand it's humbling, on the other hand it feels hopeless. And it was just like this divine intervention moment where I was like actually considering canceling some interviews today because I've just had a difficult time. And I was like, this is like exactly the person I need to talk to right now. Aww. And so I know you went through a hard time with postpartum, and I'm wondering, what was that like for you? Because you had training, you knew the things that you were supposed to do, but I think just as I'm realizing right now, it's so much different when you're in the depths of it.
Yeah, it was really hard. I had postpartum depression, and I was shocked. I was not prepared for it. I didn't ever expect that I would have it. I knew what it was from a textbook, but not from experiencing it. And right after I gave birth, a social worker came in and gave me her card and said, if you have any mental health issues, here you go. And I held onto that card not knowing that I would really need it. And, it was really difficult. I felt lack of attachment to my own child. Like, it was, of course I loved him and it was amazing, but there was like this weird disconnect. I had really traumatic thoughts. And I, even with all my training, as a therapist, as a mental health professional in so many ways, I was not prepared for having it. But I was able to reach out with that happy card from the social worker and go in, and, the psychiatrist was like, oh, well, you should do this thing called mindfulness and watch your thoughts like a cloud. And I almost wanted to throw something at her. It's like, I know how to do that. Like, please tell me something helpful I don't know. Like, I spend my life doing this. And she's like, no, actually, there's other than Zoloft, like, that is the secret. That is the thing that you do. And so, I had to pick back up my own self and look at my practice from a different direction and say, okay, these are just thoughts and it's okay. These are just feelings and it's okay. Let's do the things that I do that I know can give me joy, which is easy when you have a child. And let me accept everything else that is happening and just observe it and let it move on and not invest in it and not give it meaning. So I know it feels really hard for you right now, but you are doing incredibly. Whether it feels like it or not, you are creating meaning in other people's lives. You are creating meaning in the life of the little guy or girl inside of you. And you may feel flat, and you may feel weird, and you may feel frustrated, and you may feel a million things. And all of this is normal. And this experience that you're having, even the experience of like the crappy banality of it and the heaviness of it, this is a fascinating part of life. This is a fascinating part of what happens in a woman's mind and body when she's preparing to give birth in some cases. So this is the funny little gift you have at this moment. Just observe it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you named why it's sometimes hard for me to reach out for help, because I have seen therapists for different reasons and I'm just like, okay, tell me something I don't know though. It's like, but I think there's a disconnect sometimes, especially when we're deep into something. We think that, oh, we know this, it's been integrated, it's in our lives, not realizing, yeah, but have I meditated today? Like, where was that practice? Like, things got hard, it felt harder to meditate. Did you make yourself meditate? Like, and it's like you need that hand from your higher self to reach up and grab you. And so like plant those seeds when you're feeling good, because I feel like sometimes in those depths, it's the hardest to make the choice that's going to bring us out of it. It's like we want to make the choices that maintain our current state of mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you want to bring yourself into the present moment. So present, yes, yes, and yes. And then present moment awareness is sort of it's the thing that greases the wheels of positivity in your mind, as crazy as it seems. But being able to just be in the present moment with something, look at the things on your desk, look at the palm of your hand, feel the sensation on your belly, just bring yourself into the present moment. And part of being in that present moment with yourself starts to shift your chemistry, starts to shift your neural chemistry, and then bring in gratitude. And you may not really feel it, and you might just be, mouthing the words, but bring in all the things you're grateful for and spend a moment with them and feel them. And it might feel crappy and you might feel undeserving, and that's totally okay. Just come back to the things you're grateful for. There may be other emotions, and those can just happen too, and that's okay. And then bring in the layer of love, the layer of the deep permission you have to love yourself. Because you have, it may not feel like it, but you have deep permission to love yourself. And just think about something you do love. Pet, your mom, a best friend. Just think of that person you love and feel that sensation of love to them. Just let that sort of sparkle and open up some little like tingle of love inside yourself. And then see that love emanating from you to them like a glow, like a yellow glow from your heart, like the sun shining on them. And then you can place a mirror right between you and them, so that yellow light, that shining warm glow shines back on you. And just let that little feeling of love, sensations of warmth and love start to enter you and melt whatever else is going on inside. Start to make space for the appreciation of you and the world that you live in, and the beautiful things you're bringing into this world today.
Yeah, that coming into the body is so helpful, because I think we don't often realize how much time we spend in our minds, and then our minds become louder, and then that becomes the prominent thing in our attention. And so we give it more power, we're giving it more energy, and that tends to feed more of those thoughts. And what I found, it's interesting doing what I'm doing now, it's almost like I'm experiencing it from two different sides, like in a duality, where there's the me that's like stuck in it, that's like, oh my God, how do I get out? And then there's like the higher self me that's like watching, and I'm feeling both at the same time. And it's like, and so there's this little thought of like, well, take note of the things you're going through, because you're going to be able to help somebody through this one day. And I'm like, oh my God, that is the podcast host in you. But then it's like, so I've been really observing, and I've noticed, and I guess that's the practice, right? I'm observing the thoughts. And so the thoughts are really strong, that like, this is how it's always been. You're just only now noticing it, which makes it feel more hopeless. I'm like, oh, wow, there's never been any meaning to anything. Days have always been like this. And I'm like, but then there's the other side of me that's like, nope, that's just like a chemical composition. Your body's going through a lot. It doesn't mean anything. And so I find the hardest part is to really convince yourself that these things don't have meaning. And that used to be the easiest part for me. Like I got used to that. And it's just interesting dealing with it now, of like having to put so much more effort towards that, and still feel like in moments that I'm going through the motions, which is still helpful, because like I said, today for some reason was a great day. Like I didn't feel any of those things. But yesterday was hard. And the day before that was hard. And I was like texting my friends, like reaching out. I felt like I was like crying for help. Like I just need someone to talk me through this right now. And so it's just interesting how even when we have the training, we can get thrown back into it. And I know so many people are going through something similar. It might not have to do anything with pregnancy, but I mean, there's a lot going on in the world, and it's hard to not see the things happening and automatically ascribe meaning to it.
It's very hard. And you're doing a great job. I mean, even in this moment, you're able to look back and see, it felt so meaningful. It felt so important. It felt so true that, the world was always shit to me and I didn't see it that way. And maybe I was delusional. But you can look back and you can see that is just a thought. That is just a thought. It is not a truth. It is not a reality. And what happens when you're depressed is a negative filter falls over your eyes. It's a very simple way to describe it. And the entire world starts to be seen through this negative filter. And so anything that is in that negative filter, anything that comes up with the negative voice is now easy to say, well, that's just a depressed thought. It's just a depressed thought. That's not reality. That's a depressed thought. And it is, your opportunity to not get trapped and sucked in by those thoughts. And you can for a moment or two, totally normal, completely normal if you get sucked in. It's like, that's just the depressed mind talking. That's just a chemical shift. I don't need to go there. Redirect to the present moment. Redirect to neutral activity. Name the colors that you see around you. Feel the sensation on your hands. Come back to the present and out of your mind.
What if you don't feel like the present moment is something to come back to? I've had a lot of people reach out to me through all the chaos where, they may have lost their job, maybe their husband lost their job, they're fearful, they've lost somebody, and they feel like it's the present moment that they're trying to avoid. What's happening there? How do you unite those two? Because technically, I know in the present moment, like right here, right now, I'm fine. I'm sitting in a chair, I'm talking to you. But for most people, the present moment is also a heavy weight of all this other stuff that's happening. So what do you do in those situations?
And you're absolutely right. And thank you very much for surfacing that incredibly important point. So the present moment is not all the stuff in the world that's happening around you that's extra from you. The present moment is the table in front of you. The present moment is the air on your nose. The present moment is what's happening within 3 feet of you here and now. It is the molecules that are in the room. It's the chair underneath you. It is all of these things which are stable, which are neutral, which just are. It is not thinking about world politics. It is not the people we lost yesterday. It is not all of those things that are distant to us. It is the things that are immediately here, immediately with you now. And in this present moment, there's no coronavirus in the seat where you're sitting when you're in your own home and the door is locked. It may feel like there are boogeymen around you, but actually at this present moment, sitting in your chair here and now in your room, there is nobody there. All of these things, all of these other things are just projections of the mind. Are just the mind wanting to roll around the world that is outside, not the world that is sitting here right with you in the 3 square feet of the table, the chair, the couch. It might be in the computer, but you can push that away from you. That's the television or the remote, those things you can push away. But in the thing that is here and now, this present moment, you are actually safe. And we know that because you are alive, you are breathing, you are here. And we also know the next moment can be different. That's the amazing thing about the present moment, which is the next moment can be different. The next moment can be better. And if it's not that next moment, then the next moment after that can be better.
So we have this idea of kind of detaching from our thoughts and not giving them meaning. But what about emotions? Because sometimes those can feel the heaviest. And sometimes we can be sitting in a meditation session and we can be focusing on the present moment and we feel those emotions spilling out. So how do you approach the emotions and kind of getting a handle on that to still find that place of calm?
Sure. And it's not always about calm. It's about being able to ride through what's happening without making a big story around it. So, I can feel a sense of sadness or disappointment. And I could go like, oh no, I feel sad and disappointed. Oh no, I'm such a bad person, which then will bring on more sadness and disappointment. Oh no, I hurt, I can't believe I did that. It's going to mean this and this and this, more sadness and disappointment. And it gets heavier and heavier and bigger and bigger. Or I can start to feel some sadness and I can go like, oh no, not sadness. I hate feeling sadness. And then start to create anxiety and tension around the sadness and, magnify it that way. Or I can just say like, hey, I feel some sadness and disappointment. I feel it as a sensation of tightening in my throat. And sadness kind of feels like this weight in my chest here. And yeah, that's what's happening right now. That's a human thing to do. That's an emotion. That exists. I'm feeling it. Then in the next moment, you might not be feeling it, or you might be feeling it. And that's okay too, because I'm human. And that's the experience of being human. And I know in a future moment, it will pass. Emotions, when you don't make a greater deal about them, when you don't frustratingly resist them, when you don't wallow in them and add stories to them and amplify them and spiral them, if you don't do any of that, those things, if you're just accepting of the sensation of an emotion, it rises, it falls, it moves on.
I think that's the important part too, is it moves on. And for so much of my life, I tried to ignore the emotions or stuff them away. And I think there's something so powerful about allowing them to move through you, because there have been studies that show that that emotion gets trapped in the body and it creates other things. It manifests into other things, whether it's illnesses, whether it's onset anxiety or a more chronic form of anxiety. And so to be able to just let them rise up and surface, it's funny because just recently I was talking to somebody about how, why is it that we're fine watching The Notebook and we know we're going to have a good cry and it feels good, but then something else happens and we've attached to it, or we create some sort of different meaning around it, and that sadness feels unbearable. And it's like, yes, it might still hurt and it might still be something that we need to address in our lives, but just that idea of like, well, is it really unbearable, or what does it actually feel like? And naming it, like naming what's happening in your body. Like, okay, my chest is tight, or I feel warm here, or I feel like, can you even convince yourself that there's something good about it? Can you find the good feelings of that? How would that change your experience, you know?
Yeah, the fascination of it, the curiosity in it, the marveling at the human experience of it.
I want to go back to the Muse meditation headband because I am so curious as to how it works. So when you're wearing it, what exactly is it tracking? Is it able to track your brain's activity? It just seems so technologically advanced.
Sure. So Muse is based on a focused attention meditation practice. So it's a slim little headband that, it's kind of like a Fitbit for your brain. It has EEG sensors that track your brain activity during meditation and translate them into guiding sounds. So in your focused attention practice, when you focus your attention on your breath, the sound is quiet. When your mind wanders away from your breath, the sounds pick up. And those louder sounds are an indication to you that your mind is wandering, and that becomes your cue to then come back to focused attention to your breath, which will then quiet the sound again. So you're literally hearing the sound of your mind. You're hearing when your mind is wandering away and when it's quiet. And so you're actually getting real-time feedback during your meditation to know when you're focused and to know when you're wandering, and to reinforce you for staying in that state of focused attention, the meditation state. And then after the fact, you get data. You get charts and graphs and scores and things that show you what your brain was doing moment to moment and really give you insight in your practice and how you can improve. So we have sensors for the brain as well as for the heart, the breath, and the body. So you can actually track each one of your physiological symptoms and do different kinds. You can track each one of your physiological systems and do different kinds of meditation for each of the different physiological aspects of your body, your heart, your breath, and your mind.
And do you have any tips for making meditation a habit? Because I think that's the hardest part for some people. They're like, okay, New Year's resolution, I'm going to be a meditator now. And then they do it a few times and they completely fall off the wagon. So how is it that you make it a practice that you know that you can start to trust yourself to keep coming back to?
So in Muse, what we have is a motivational architecture. So we have badges and goals and rewards and things that make it very compelling to come back to. We have streaks, so you can actually track every time you meditate. And when you miss one, it misses your streak. And it turns out that probably streaks is the most compelling thing that keeps people coming back to their meditation. Streaks and actually being able to see improvement. So in Muse, it saves your sessions and you can actually see from one session to the next that you're improving. And that sensation of improving, that understanding that you're getting better at something is also incredibly compelling. So we find people with their Muse stick to their meditation habit, many, many, many times more than you would without the assistance of a device or something external giving you that regular motivation.
Well, it sounds so amazing. So for listeners that are interested in learning more about you or about Muse, where's the best place that they can connect with you online?
You can go to our website, choosemuse.com/welcome. So that's CHOOSEMUSE.com/welcome. And there you can find a discount code for Muse. And then for my own personal contact, you can reach out to me through Instagram at ChooseMuse and Ariel's Musings.
All of the links from this episode will be at mindlove.com/X26. And don't forget, I have a special discount code for you for the Muse headband in case you need a last-minute Christmas gift or a gift for yourself to start the new year with a new positive habit. I know that so many people add meditation to their New Year's resolutions, but they fall off the wagon because they have never learned a proper structure, or they haven't figured out a way to keep themselves coming back, to make it a habit. And the Muse meditation headband is perfect for that because it's a lot of fun to track your progress. Plus, we'll be doing it together. So I want to see if you did purchase this. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa and let's share some insights because I cannot tell you how excited I am about this thing. I love mindful tech. Tech gets a bad rap because there's a lot of downsides to it if we let it go unchecked or if we fall into a spiral of consuming too much or binging too much. But mindful tech is amazing. We live in a time where there's basically unlimited technological advances. It's so cool. And when we use that for good or intentionally to improve ourselves, then we actually use the power of technology to advance ourselves. It is so cool. It's just such an exciting time to be alive. So, regardless of if you buy the Muse meditation headband, your challenge for this week is to create a structure for your meditation. Create maybe a cozy little nook that you get excited to go to in your house to sit and think quietly. Maybe it doesn't look like meditation right away. Maybe it's just finding a little stillness. But start to find that quiet within yourself, even if only for a minute at the beginning, and see how you progress from there. You can also try to track your own progress by noticing how often you get distracted or noticing how long you can stay on that cushion. So let me know how it goes. I'm wishing you all very happy holidays, whatever you happen to be celebrating. Know that I am listening to Christmas tunes probably at this very moment because I love them. So I'm sending you all so much love and thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next time.